Hello and welcome to another spoiler episode of Umineko. This video is going to cover episode 3, parts 7 and 8. And for the first time in a while, there will be a little bit of murder speculation at the end. I'll keep that all to the back half of the video. The amount of mystery is relatively light at this point, so I don't think it'll be very long. But before we get there, we have some stuff to talk about. As much as I enjoy Goda being chased down and him being a little bit of a coward, it's very fun. There's not a lot of meat there of anything I want to talk about in particular. The juicier parts in these videos come with Virgillia, her interactions with Beatrice, and some of the gestures towards broader stuff happening there. In some ways, Virgillia exists to do a lot... In this section, Virgillia exists to do a lot of flagging of some of the stuff going on here. The very concept that Virgillia passes her name on to Beatrice is meant to be a fairly significant hint to the ways in which Beatrice is not a singular body, not a singular human person, but a concept and a broader character who stretches beyond more than one life. And of course that then gestures to the even wider idea of multiple people and multiple lives coming from a single body, kind of inverse in a sense. An interesting consequence of this is that Virgillia exists as a person without a name for a while here. She is Beatrice's teacher, she is a person who has given her name away, and yet she gets resurrected and comes back and spends a significant amount of screen time not even having a new name and just having no name on her text box. Which interestingly parallels Beatrice, who until she becomes Beatrice and becomes crowned as the new Golden Witch, she also just sticks around and speaks as an individual personality but does not get a title on her text boxes. She's not even addressed as Ava, she is just a person speaking. Similar to how Virgillia spends a long time just not having a name attached to her words. And in some sense, Virgillia here, especially after she's defeated by Beatrice, seems to speak as a person who is outside of the game board on both accounts. She refers to herself as basically being a piece that has been taken off the board, almost insinuating that she shouldn't even exist on the meta layer, or that she is not a part of it, despite being Battler's advisor and being very clearly involved. But also, her relationship to Beatrice is fascinating in these sections. Beatrice, one of the first things Beatrice says to Virgillia is, "What are you calling magic? What are you calling the Endless Witch? All you've got is a power that can be gained just by noticing, right? And you act as though that's so great and impressive." This is interesting to think about the broader cosmology and the origination of Beatrice, because we know Virgillia as being the magical form of Kumasawa. Virgillia is someone who taught young Beatrice how to use magic. She uses the more straightforward form of magic, where you can construct a narrative, where you are not changing a material reality, but you are maybe obfuscating certain conditions or events in order to put together a more favorable situation. It's, again, a thing I've talked about ages ago of misdirection. At the beginning of this episode, Virgillia, then Beatrice, saves Beatrice II by basically changing how a vase was broken. Now, this is something she does with magic, but it is a magic that, as Beatrice says, can be gained just by noticing, just by being aware that this could be done. It's theoretically achievable for anyone, and in a certain sense is nothing special. Now obviously, if Beatrice is saying this, Beatrice has something that cannot be gained just by noticing. Beatrice has acquired a further degree of magical power, where she has this endless island to repeat things to her whims and do anything she wants. She has gained a power beyond simply weaving threads of narrative. from just external conversations, not something inherent in the game, besides, I guess, hints in the game that you could extrapolate from. I know this is to do with Lady Lambda Delta bestowing power upon Beatrice, being her patron, etc., etc. I'm less interested in that. I'm more interested in the fact that Virgillia taught Beatrice a power that was quite limited, that was quite small in scope and specific, but that Beatrice, after having learned from Virgillia, found access to a greater power, and found access in a power that makes her discredit and disrespect her original teacher. There's even seemingly an insecurity from Beatrice here, where Beatrice refers to Virgillia acting as though what she did was so great and impressive, which to me speaks to Beatrice feeling insecure about her lacking ability in comparison to her teacher, that she has then basically superseded by getting a vast amount of power and magic that her teacher couldn't even dream of mustering, that she doesn't understand. And so she has made up for what maybe could have been a shortcoming or a difficulty in learning by just getting a huge power and now wielding that as a much more blunt instrument. Now, if you want to think about things in massively mundane ways, you could think about the fact that Kumasawa taught a young servant how they can weave narratives to help them deal with situations, get around things, avoid problems or blame, and then that young servant found out that they had access to vast reserves of gold and could use gold to coerce people to not just, oh, I will tell white lies or talk around things for my own benefit. I will get people to be complicit in crimes. I will get people to commit murder or just assist in it, because money gives you a vast amount of power over people that goes far beyond simply telling lies around a situation, or half-truths, however you want to frame it. This dynamic between Beatrice and Virgillia is interesting too, because later Virgillia will acknowledge the ways in which she is a subservient servant to Beatrice, and always was, even as a teacher. She in one sense had power and influence over Beatrice in that she was a wiser, older person teaching things to Beatrice, but that at the same time she existed subservient to Beatrice because of the power structure of being hired help. As a child, Beatrice would feel more of a hierarchy where she is basically below her teacher, who is obviously older and wiser about things. Whereas upon growing older, Beatrice would be more aware of just the dynamic between a servant and their employer. I don't have a ton to say about the magical chess battle, except that it's funny that it is chess, including the fact that there are 8 giants before one of them gets destroyed and reduced to 7. And then I also enjoy the silly exponential math, how there are 7 giants, each throwing 30 lightning spears, which makes 210. Each lightning spear splitting into 30 thorns, causing 6,300 thorns, each of which changing into 3 bolts of lightning, which also means that a lightning spear turned into a thorn and then back into lightning, resulting in 18,900 thunderbolts, none of which hits. So the number is also irrelevant at that point. It's a very funny, childish escalation of things where you are simply playing effectively chess, but overblowing what is happening with meaningless numbers, because at the end of the day, the number of these things sounds like a huge attack, but that doesn't really matter if none of them hits. It's all just pomp and bravado. And that both of them do it is funny too. This is not a situation where Virgillia is simply trying to address Beatrice in a more straightforward manner. I think both of them summon huge towers and Virgillia calls in Gungnir. One thing I do find interesting is the ways this game gestures broadly at Beatrice's behavior and approach to the game, both this episode and in general, where she basically toys with Virgillia after having won. Beatrice manages to win, but lets Virgillia keep playing until Virgillia thinks she has beaten Beatrice, and then Beatrice pulls back the curtains like, actually I killed you 4 turns ago. Which is going to be fun when we get to the end of this episode, and Battler almost signs. But even aside from that, this speaks to the opposite being the case with how this game works. We know that Beatrice, the person, has died already. The events of Rokkenjima are locked in place, and only 2 bodies escape that island, and they are neither of which are Beatrice. So in a certain sense, again, all of this game and what is happening, these are going beyond the result being determined. The game is over, yet Beatrice endlessly cycles on what the weekend could have been, and how she might have won in various ways. It is also funny that Beatrice acknowledges that it is bad manners to do what she is doing, because in this episode too, we'll get to see a little bit of Beatrice being a really bad winner and enjoying her advantage too much to the point of pushing out Battler from the game and making it basically something he stops giving a shit about. Moving on, we get to see a bit of the Ushiromiyas siblings having stayed up all night talking about the Beatrice problem and what to do about it. One thing I like about the series as a whole, but in particular this episode has it regularly, the material conditions these people are in are very important. These people have all just stayed up all night and not yet had breakfast, and they are exhausted, to say the least. And things like that will impair your judgment. Vague spoilers for Higurashi, but nothing serious really. Higurashi, a game about murder, deals a lot with how literal and specific situations lead to people committing murders. And one thing that's clear in Higurashi, and is important for Umineko too, is that very particular situations lead to people doing things. And exactly how they're feeling and in what state they are, these are all things that are important and matter. People are not simply murderers for the most part. The reason these things happen arise out of a particular situation. What exactly is happening, what drives people to do things, what they're motivated by, what emotions they're feeling, what physical state they're in. All of these things are very important. It is not simply, oh, Ava would shoot a person. But there are things that would drive Ava to shoot a person. And one of those things could be sleep deprivation and lack of nutrition, leading her more paranoid and worried impulses to be a little bit overactive. And I also think it's fun to think about the fact that the episode where all of the servants have been taken out has all of these people with their material needs being less taken care of than in previous episodes. In the previous 2 episodes at least, the servants have still been around to whip up some sort of food for these people. Whereas this one, in part because they go to the guest house and avoid the mansion, they're just eating crackers and tinned food. They don't even have Goda to dress it up for them. And another thing you'll see throughout this section that I expect to be ongoing a little bit is the ambivalent situation a lot of people find themselves in. Ava in particular, and also we'll see Rosa, go back and forth between thinking that this is fully an act by Kinzo, that this is all faked, that nobody is dead or has died, but that the possibility a culprit exists is a concern and something they should treat seriously. They did get all of those guns down. They didn't entirely give up on the idea that a person might have done any of this, or that anyone might have done anything. They're taking precautions. Because again, if you were told there was a 1% chance there was a murderer in the neighborhood, you wouldn't go, I mean, that means it's probably not true then, so I will do simply nothing. You would take a degree of caution and care because of the idea that a person nearby could be out to murder you. So they have all done this despite also regularly telling themselves this does seem like the kind of thing Kinzo would do to put up a fake thing. It is interesting that it's only the servants that got killed, and Kinzo's corpse, in quotation marks, showed up burned to a crisp, making it difficult to recognize aside from a conspicuously blatant clue of a sixth toe. And again, all the siblings already have suspicions that Kinzo might just be dead and that Natsuhi and Krause might be hiding it. It does seem like in this situation, they're not suspicious of Natsuhi and Krause of having orchestrated this situation. But again, they often will hold multiple competing thoughts in their head, and I would be very surprised if none of them is still thinking about the idea that Kinzo has been dead for a while. And then we get to Beatrice trying to pass her turn to Battler while antagonizing him, and finding out that she's pushed his buttons a little too much and he is outright rejecting the idea of playing with her anymore. It's an interesting exchange where Beatrice is doing her usual taunting and being aggressive towards him, and Battler's reaction is not simply taunting back in kind, but straight up telling her to shut up and get out of his face. And it actually catches Beatrice off guard. Specifically, Beatrice winced reflexively at Battler's sudden rage. And then she's a little bit cowed and is trying to say, like, oh, hey, you should take your turn so that I can make my turn. We're supposed to continue playing this game. And Battler's like, I don't care about the game. I have no idea what's going on. This magical battle was so ludicrous and far too much. And again, Battler's also saying, I don't care about a game. You are murdering all of my family and friends. And this is where we talked a little bit about the thing I said where Beatrice is being a bad winner, or even just a bad player. Because there's a fun thing to think about here where Beatrice considers the jabs and the barbs part of the game, the shit talking and the kind of making fun of Battler and pushing him and prodding him as he gets agitated. She has fun dishing that stuff out, and that is part of the fun of the game to her. But the game is often said to not be on equal footing because Battler is so outmatched and out of his depth. Even aside from advantages or head starts or anything like that, there's a different way in which there's a different way in which a game can be uneven, and that's when different players have different approaches and objectives. Battler, for his part, likes a little bit of jockeying and kind of jabbing each other back and forth, but hits a limit when Beatrice has pushed him too far, and when things get overwhelming and he starts to feel like he has no moves to make, and also starts to feel like, why am I playing a game? Why should I take any part in this thing where I can make no moves? This person is just killing my family over and over again. What value is there in going on with this? There's a point at which Battler feels like there's nothing to do, there's nothing worth doing, why would he even do this? And Beatrice, in part, the mockery has pushed him to this point. What's funny is that Beatrice has brought in Virgillia to solve this problem. Because Virgillia giving Battler assistance, Virgilia's been summoned by Beatrice. I fully think it is somewhat intentional that she wanted somebody to give Battler a hand, because he is so completely unable to, by himself, rethink the situation and come to the understandings that Virgilia is able to give him pretty quickly. But Beatrice herself can't do those things, and so she calls in the help. And what's funny, as said other times, that Beatrice can't take this stuff because, again, part of what Beatrice is somewhat abrasive and aggressive in these ways because she can't handle that stuff herself. So that even when, by the end of this section, Battler bests her, and specifically doesn't gloat, it kind of bothers her a little to realize the difference between them, where Battler is being gracious here. Even though, again, Battler's sin is a lot of why she's doing this. He has done something messed up, but that doesn't make him a totally insensitive person. And again, that's a core thing to Umineko, that a lot of people who do good things are not wholly good. A lot of people who do bad things are not wholly bad. And just because Beatrice has been deeply wronged, in many ways, does not give her a free pass to do whatever the hell she wants, and feel like she is always in the right. There's even a tidbit of Battler being humble where, when talking to Virgillia and she's talking about how fire works and how gravity works, the Battler seems to actually have a pretty good understanding of the science behind these things. He straight up knows about Joule and Joule's law and stuff, and Virgilia compliments him on this, and Battler's quite offhandedly dismissive and just like, it's just some trivia. Where Battler is quite humble in funny ways. And it's interesting to note that, because he comes off as such a stupid goof, but obviously is intelligent enough at certain times in certain ways, and it's fun to see that crop up at times. Of course, this game has the Braun tube metaphor, which is, a really good metaphor. I like it. It's actually very instructive on how to read the magic in these scenes. I'm kind of ignoring large swaths of this section because a lot of it is just elaborating on how I've been discussing magic up to this point. But Battler has a line, "Where is the Braun tube in this world? Because it exists. There should be no reason for us to argue." Of course, the Braun tube is about Beatrice Shannon Cannon's body. The person born of Kinzo at the heart of all of this stuff. And Battler is wondering, could they not simply cut the game short and cut to the chase and reveal that, and then they know who is correct? But of course, the reason one cannot do that is because what is inside this Braun tube is not straightforward. It is a matter of judgment, opinion, and what people as a whole would have to make a judgment on. And a large part of why Beatrice wants to obscure it is because people are known to be shitty about judgment in this area. And in particular, she cannot expect the Ushiromiyas to be graceful about this. So she cannot reveal the Braun tube. I absolutely don't think Battler would take it well or believe it, especially having gone this far with Beatrice. And the debate part is important because, again, to Beatrice, answering this question without revealing a objective, quote-unquote objective truth is important to the core issue, because Battler believing and being convinced and believing is more important than Battler simply accepting. That mostly covers thematic stuff to discuss for this video, so now it's time for a little bit of theorizing. And this, so far, feels like a relatively uncomplicated situation that I will probably firm up certain details of as we get further into the episode, because it's a matter of questioning how many accomplices there might or might not be. Put pretty straightforwardly, the 6 interlocking rooms obviously has one particular hole that is not obvious to Battler in this situation, that both Shannon and Cannon, sharing the same body, cannot be seen at the same time, nor can they be seen in close proximity. But of course, the interlocking rooms have a pretty good trick for this, which is that the Ushiromiyas are led on a particular cyclic path by the keys, because they get one key at a time. Even though they have master keys every time they discover a corpse, they still follow the thread in order, and having to go through the whole mansion, check rooms, check people, search them, etc. That would give plenty of time for, after Shannon's body is discovered, that Beatrice could slip out, disappear to the chapel where Cannon's body is, which is discovered last. And resolving that complication then, to me, feels like a pretty big clue to the rest of it. As always, the locked rooms are not real and are fake. So in that sense, obviously Nanjo is lying about the bodies being dead. So even though Shannon and Cannon are dead as verified by the Red Truth, their body continues to live on, inhabited by Beatrice, who resumes the murdering. I may have to revise later whether or not technically Runaway might be alive and well, or any other accomplices. But again, I will keep it more simple, small, and straightforward for now and say that there is a single body active. And obviously there's an interesting wrinkle around how death works that is brought attention to by the fact that Battler tries to whittle down whether or not people died in a homicide, and how Beatrice avoids saying homicide but seems to be pretty quick to saying it was not suicide or an accident either, before Radovay stops her because she is clearly painting herself into a corner where Battler will have to start to reckon with how one can die without it being murder, suicide, or accident, and start to rethink his understanding of what death and life actually are. And of course, because of how the death works, the keys are less of an issue in that Cannon could let himself into the chapel with the key and then lock himself in and then die in there and have Beatrice instead take over. I am looking forward to the further Twilights as it starts to get messier, with Ava also involved. To what extent? Well, we'll be finding out, won't we? But for now, I'm pretty content with what I have said. Again, as more Red Truths come up and as I look at Red Truths from future episodes towards the end, I will have to refine my thoughts, but so far, as usual, I'm starting pretty broad. And that's going to do it for this spoiler episode. I look forward to dissecting Avatrice even more as she becomes another witch, and Beatrice's upcoming turn is going to be a lot of fun to talk about. But until we get there, thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.